and CEO of Moneyfront, Mohit. Good morning. Spate of good news coming for the Indian markets. First, the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, softening of oil prices, as well as good momentum on the Indian rupee. What's driving or likely to drive the mood of the markets here on?
Hi, Kartik. Good morning. And yes, I think you've rightly summarized everything which is sounding and looking good this morning. Honestly, I think the biggest positive for the markets is the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, though it was called day before also. But I think yesterday the
Quite
market
well.
had a kind of a itch that somewhere there was a violation of the ceasefire, but and we saw heavy selling by FIs yesterday. But thankfully, I think there seems to be semblance of peace now. There seems to be a ceasefire now, and given the global mood today morning, which is US ending in positive yesterday night, US tech doing extremely well, which augurs very well for global markets, and obviously all the global indices looking in green, right? And aided by good numbers which continue to pour from the Indian market. Kartik, I would give a good amount of credit to the global scenario.
Well, we will try to bring Mohit Gang back. Meanwhile, the Indian rupee made a strong comeback on Tuesday, rebounding sharply from record lows to post its steepest single-day gain in nearly 5 years. The currency jumped 73 paisa to settle at 86.05 against the US dollar. Now, this was driven by sharp decline in global crude oil prices and easing geopolitical tensions in West Asia. Brent crude, the global benchmark oil index, plunged over 3% to $69.20 per barrel after US President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire agreement between Iran and Israel. Forex traders said the rupee rally was further supported by a weaker US dollar globally and strong domestic equity markets. Let's look at the markets as they're faring right now. Good news coming in from most indices. The Sensex and the Nifty are up in trade this morning. Mohit Gang continues to be with us. Mohit, tell us exactly how oil prices, which have now eased to lows that are mouth-watering, now that the ceasefire seems to be holding and potentially the conflict in West Asia could draw towards a final conclusion, what happens to the impact of oil prices on the Indian economy and on the mood of markets from here on?
Sure. Karthik, I think I'm getting a bit of a pause when I speak, just for a mild second. But yeah, I'll try and put my views on the oil thing. So look, honestly, I think oil coming down is by far the most fantastic news which Indian markets can hope for, and that's the biggest positive which we see around. And the way oil has cooled off in last 2 days, I think it's dramatic, and that gives you a good semblance of peace, gives you a good macro impetus, and I think overall Indian growth also, if you see the GDP numbers which have been forecasted by global agencies for FY26 are back at 6.5%. So I think that's where the markets are celebrating the good news. The GDP numbers looking back at 6.5 and the oil cooling off.
All right, let's move on, Mohit. Stay with us. I also want to bring your opinion into the defense talks, and that has also been talk of the town, especially with the ceasefire. But meanwhile, the story coming in from HAL is that India is set to take a major leap in indigenous defense manufacturing, with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or HAL, expected to seal a landmark jet engine deal with US defense giant GE Aerospace by the month of March next year. Now, speaking to PTI, HAL Chairman and Managing Director DK Sunil confirmed that key negotiations on technology transfer have been concluded, with both sides now working through the commercial aspects. The agreement, part of a mega plan first announced during Prime Minister Modi's 2023 US visit, involves joint production of GE's F414 engines in India, a critical component for the Tejas light combat aircraft Mark II and the upcoming advanced medium combat aircraft prototypes as well. Now, meanwhile, HAL is also preparing for another milestone, the 62,700 crore rupee contract to supply as many as 156 light combat helicopters, Prachand, to the Indian Army. Now, deliveries will begin in 2028, with all helicopters fully manufactured in India. Now, the Prachand, capable of operating at altitudes above 4,500 meters, is India's first indigenously designed combat helicopter equipped with rockets and anti-tank guided missiles. HL stock this morning, though, tumbling down about a third of a percentage point. Mohit, one tends to believe that every time the scenario of conflict is hot, defense stocks tend to do well. And as the momentum of conflict reduces, we see the defense stocks start ebbing a little lower. But a spate of good announcements coming from HL, but not reflecting in the stock story at all.
Look, I think there's no dearth of good announcements given the geopolitical scenario, Kartik. Only thing is the execution capability. The order books are all full. Order books are all full across the names. The multiples are soaring. The valuations are crazy. And only the execution has to be seen and justified. Honestly, if they can show and prove execution, which perhaps might be the case with few large cap names, but few small caps names quoting at crazy valuations, I really doubt whether they can successfully execute those kind of order books, right? So one has to be very, very cautious and cognizant of the fact that yes, the geopolitical scenario kind of supports the defense as a sector, but they aren't coming cheap to you.
A final question on the defense stocks to you, Mohit, and this comes from the fact that defense spending in the European Union is now likely to go up. In fact, Germany has already announced that it will take up defense budget to about 3.5% of GDP, and this pressure on all other European economies also to over time take defense spending up to 5% of GDP. Does that augur well for India's own defense capabilities and orders flowing into India, or do you think India is yet to become a formidable player in defense manufacturing?
Look, honestly, when it comes to advanced fighter jets, advanced drone technologies and other things, I think India is still at a very nascent stage. And I don't think so India commands a huge export market out there. But yes, if the overall market expands, we will tend to benefit to some extent, right? We will perhaps benefit from the fallout or maybe from the auxiliaries of all these places. So yes, there is a little bit of a positive sentiment around which we will benefit from, but I don't think so it's a massive uplift for the Indian defense export per se.
All right. And one final question before I let you go, Mohit, and this is coming in from, of course, the US tariff perspective. Exactly 2 weeks to go. We're still far from stitching that bilateral trade agreement with the United States, and tariffs likely to come into effect on the 9th of July, unless, of course, there's another U-turn or another extension of deadline by Donald Trump, which may not be all that unsurprising. But the fact is that Indian markets seem to have already priced in those tariffs. What are some of the shocks that could come and hit India closer to that date?
Look, I think, and I'm still hopeful that we will kind of stitch a trade deal together, where whether a full-blown trade deal or a fully blown FTA, I doubt that. But yes, there would be some bit of a trade deal which will stitch together. And I think now that the West Asia conflict is past us, the bulk of it is past us. I think now all eyes are back to the trade desk across the globe. So, and my sense is India US is perhaps the biggest item on the table right now. So whatever India and US decide on the trade part, I think that will shape up the markets going forward in a big way.
All right, Mohit Gang, let's leave it at that. Always a pleasure having you right here on News 9. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure.